This is Danny Barbaro, President of AIM Dental Marketing, welcoming you to this installment of the Practice Perfection Web-Based Education Series. Today's presentation is entitled, Dentistry is a Team Sport. Empower your team to be champion performers. Clinical and technical skills are critical to your success in dentistry. Equally important to your clinical outcomes and bottom line, however, are behavior skills, the way your team interacts among themselves and with current and prospective patients. While we can't always predict what interactions will arise, you can influence your team to adapt and respond in new and more effective ways. World Series winning pitcher Jim Mecir and professional speaker, facilitator, and applied improviser Ellen Schnur are here today to show you how to empower everyone on your team to foster a culture that makes everyone feel safe and respected, deal more effectively with difficult people, become more aware of their impact on others, listen like they want to be heard, adapt to uncertainty and change, develop greater resiliency, and learn about conflict transformation.
Well, thank you, Danny, for having us here.
Wait, there's more, Ellen.
Oh, there's more. Okay, sorry.
There is. We've got to do a little bit of perfunctory introductions here. Today's event will run for around 90 minutes. While attendees are in listen-only mode, we invite all of you at any time to submit your questions or comments using the question button on your screen. We will allow time following the presentation to get your questions answered. If we do not get to your question during the webcast, we'll see that it's answered shortly thereafter. Attendance at this presentation entitles you to apply to receive 1.5 hours of continuing education credit. Shortly following the webcast, we will send you an email with instructions for receiving your CE. Please note that the code for this course is IMP 032220. You will need this code to request your CE, so please be sure to write it down. And now, it is my distinct pleasure to welcome to the Practice Perfection stage, Ms. Ellen Schnur and Mr. Jim Mecir. Take it away, friends.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us so much. I want to be upfront with you all. For some reason, GoToWebinar is not allowing me in, so all I can do is hear everybody. I can't see everybody, and I can't see the slide presentation. So Danny and I are going to have more of a conversation about changing slides than we had planned. But I'm an improviser. We're improvisers, so we'll just go from there. So Danny, can you put the slide up with Jim?
Yep.
And his baseball stuff. Great. So this is my business partner, Jim Mecir. You also see him on the webinar. Jim has a World Series ring from the New York Yankees, and he was on the Oakland A's Moneyball team of book and movie fame. Funny little thing is that Jim and the team were flown out to be actually in the movie Moneyball, but when they got there, they were told that they had sold the movie. I didn't know you do that, but they had sold the movie, and they sent them all home and replaced Jim and the rest of the team with Brad Pitt. So not bad being replaced with Brad Pitt. Anyway, Jim was recently inducted into the New York State Baseball Hall of Fame, and he won the Tony Conigliaro Award, an award given to a player who overcame the most adversity. The adversity that Jim overcame is that he was born with a club foot, and yet he played professional baseball for 15 years. One more thing is that I am honestly, and Jim will attest to this, I am honestly not a baseball fan, not at all. But what I love is his inspiring stories, and that he has a tremendous amount of knowledge about leadership and teamwork and how to be a great team player. And honestly, he's the best teammate I've ever had.
Thanks, Ellen, as usual, you're making me blush. But the mystery voice you hear is Ellen Schnur, and she has 25 years of experience in training and management. She is a distinguished Toastmaster. She's taking improv classes at Second City and Improv Olympic, and currently she is involved with 2 improv troupes. So she truly has a passion for it, and she's right, she does not have a passion for baseball. I don't think she could probably still name the teams that I played on, but I took her classes and I realized just how important all the lessons I learned for improv relate to everyday life of baseball and medicine. So Danny, could you tell us today who's with us?
I sure can. I just want to make sure that everyone can see my screen. It appears that they can. So yeah, let's go ahead and launch that poll. And if everyone could just take a moment and let us know who you are in terms, at least, of your position in the practice. Are you a practice owner, associate, assistant, office manager, or hygienist? And we'll just give you a few moments to fill that out. See, we are getting responses. Looks like practice owners it's neck and neck with office managers, but here come hygienists around the far bend. Associate assistants falling far behind. And we're reaching the wire here. Just a few more seconds. I know some people are driving. Don't bother answering the poll, and we will now close and share the results. And what we are showing, share poll results. Yep, I hope everyone can see. Regardless, we have 50% of you are practice owners, 40% are office managers, 10% are hygienists. We seem to have no assistants or associates on the webcast this evening.
All right, thanks, Danny.
Interesting.
So we just want to let you know, usually our events, they're very interactive. We're involved with everybody. They do the exercises, get the lessons, and they have a lot of fun. But since it's webinar style, we're going to have to just talk you through some of the exercises that we have so that you can bring them back to your team. And along the way, I'll be telling stories from my career that really reinforce those points.
The funniest thing of all is that, you know, not only are we interactive, usually I'm like interacting face to face with people. Now I can't even see anything. So this is quite the adventure. So,
quite the challenge.
So Danny, is the hard skills slide up?
Well, we've got the dental research journal, and that's it.
Perfect.
Yes, distinguishing between hard and soft skills.
That's the one. Okay, great. So the thing about improvisation and the things that we don't teach hard skills. Obviously, I'm not going to teach you anything about dentistry, and Danny has lots of other really amazing guests who teach you a lot about that. What we teach is what we call behavioral skills or soft skills, how your team interacts and behaves with one another. And why really does that matter? Well, because you probably aren't going to hear, can I have the next slide, Danny?
Yep.
Probably not going to hear anyone say, you know, wow, that my dentist is technically amazing, or that's the best full mouth restoration I've ever seen. Probably nothing like that. You're probably going to hear something like this. Can we go to the next slide, Danny? Probably going to hear more about what they experienced with the people there, right? Everyone was so nice and it was so refreshing, and everyone cared so much. Whatever the comments are, it was more about the experience that they have, their experience. But I'm going to say something a little bit controversial for some people. Some people actually don't agree with this at all, but some don't. Some do agree, sorry. We believe that instead of the mantra, patients or customers come first, because that's been the mantra forever, we believe, can I have the next slide, Danny?
There.
Oh, okay. We believe that your team comes first. I didn't get to have the dramatic changeover. So there's just so much information out there, research showing that organizations that with the most loyal patients or customers have focused first on their internal culture, on their own employees or team. And Gallup polls show over and over that the more engaged people are at their job, the better the company actually performs. So next slide, Danny.
Yep.
All right, this is one of my favorite sayings. The strength of the pack is in the wolf, and the strength of the wolf is in the pack. And a lot of people attribute this, you want to go to the next slide, this saying to Phil Jackson from the Bulls from their first championship season. But actually, it was Rudyard Kipling, a British poet and author, who wrote that. And he actually wrote it in for, next slide, the Jungle Book. It's actually the law of the jungle, and Mobley talks about the law of the jungle. So what that means for you basically is, in the bottom line, is that everyone on the team is important to the success of the team. The strength of the wolf is in the pack, and the strength of the pack is in the wolf. Can I get the next slide, Danny? So there's lots of formulas and articles and books and information on how to engage and empower your employees. And we don't exactly have a formula that we share. Next slide. We teach what's called dental improv. And as you can read for yourself, what I wrote there, it's really an interactive experience for people where they embody the lessons by doing activities, and then they talk about them afterwards and how they actually relate to their jobs. Don't even need to take notes because they're talking themselves through the lessons as they go. And if you look on the left side of the slide, that's just a screenshot of a lot of the data that I've gathered. And there's much, much more, but this is on our website, improvtalk.com, if you want to take a look. Research on dental improv and medical improv and improvisation and how it helps with behavioral skills and people skills. Not only that, but we have a lot of fun. And fun is a very underrated. I'm going to tell you, I didn't tell Danny and Jim this, but since Madeleine Albright just died, there's a really amazing story about her, quick one. So when she was Secretary of State in 1998, she went to a world conference, and she was told that at the end of the week, at the end of the conference, she was going to have to perform some kind of a skit. And so it was getting towards the end of the week, and she was told that she was going to be paired up with her Russian counterpart, Yevgeny, I hope I said that right, Primakov. And he wasn't exactly the easiest person to get along with. He kept reminding her that he was former KGB and he knew everything about her. And so their relationship was a little bit, it was tense. But she got paired up with him, and they ended up doing a version of West Side Story where they sang a song about East-West. And I guess it was amazing. They had spent the night before, and I guess there was a lot of vodka involved, creating this thing together, and they worked really hard on it, and it was a big hit at the conference. But the most amazing part of that story is that they went on to become friends, and even though they had to deal with a lot of difficult issues and didn't always agree, it really transformed their relationship, and they were able to, they stayed in touch and stayed friends throughout. You really can't be mad at somebody when you're laughing together. So next slide, Danny. So we were speaking at a conference, Jim and I were speaking at a conference, and after we were teaching what we teach about communication skills and team skills and team building. And afterwards we had a roundtable discussion and with some of the C-suite executives. And one of the women at my table told a story that just stopped everyone in their tracks. She had been struggling with trying to increase her profits for years for her manufacturing company. She tried everything from increasing her marketing and reducing her costs, and those are all great strategies, but it just wasn't working for her. So she decided to talk to a trusted advisor and friend, and he said to her, you know, your strongest suit has always been that you genuinely care about people, so why don't you try applying that to your staff? So the very next day she went down to the floor and she started talking to people. And one young man in particular, she really liked him. And so she invited him to lunch. And while they were at lunch, she learned from him that his wife and his daughter were about to be deported. So she went back to the office immediately and contacted attorneys and was able to stop the deportation. And the result of that is that her employees looked at her as a hero, and they started becoming much more engaged in the business, and her bottom line steadily increased. So she began to put her employees first, and they started putting her first, and the bottom line kept growing. So you have to care about the people you work for. Next slide, Danny.
Let's make sure we're in alignment. The next slide is Viola Spagnola with Hull House.
It is. That is Viola Spagnola. And I'm not used to lecturing so much. Usually we just do little bits and then we do activities with people, and it's very interactive. So this is a new experience for me. Anyway, so the background to improvisation is quite surprising to a lot of people. Viola Spagnola, just a second here. I'm going to get this up here. Viola Spagnola was a social worker back in the 30s. And she worked at a place called the Hull House in Chicago. And the Hull House helped immigrant children in the neighborhoods. It was very poor. It was back in the 30s again, and very poor. And so they had this special place for kids to go to help to learn better communication and social skills. And a lot of them didn't even speak English. So what she did is she began to use theater techniques to help these kids learn how to communicate better and get better social skills. Her son, Paul Sills, next slide, please. He's one of the founders of Second City Improv here in Chicago. And let me change my slide too. There we go. So Second City produced a lot of very famous actors. As you can see, a lot of the recognizable faces there, Stephen Colbert and Tina Fey and Bill Murray. And basically, Second City taught people how to improvise. And what that means is take a suggestion from the audience and perform in front of the audience, create something, collaborate together without a script, and create the show in the moment. And so they learned a lot of tools and mindsets to be able to do that. And what they began to realize after a while is those very tools and mindsets that they were teaching improvisers and actors actually translated incredibly well to the real world, to life. And it actually can translate into being a better human being. And that's what attracted me to all of this work in the first place, is that I started applying the tools and mindsets to my life and to my work and started seeing amazing things start to happen. And dental improv, is a version of applied we call it applied improvisation.
Ellen, I just heard an interview with Stephen Colbert when they just asked him to share things that people didn't know about him, and he said the main thing that he learned at improv was that he was the least important person on the stage. That his job was to make other people look good, and if you really watch his, now whether he's definitely somewhat of a polarizing figure because of his political views. But if you watch him interview, he always empowers the guest. He's never competing for the spotlight with them, and you can tell that at least I read it, that his heart is sincere in wanting to make other people comfortable and look good. So I think that's a really important lesson that I learned too. As you know, I'm also a graduate of the Players Workshop of Second City, and that was the most teachable moment for me, at least the one that I carried through into my business and life.
That is so true. I don't know if you've heard of TJ and Dave, Danny, but I call them the world champions of improvisation, and they are just amazing. And one of them, I think it was TJ, won Improviser of the Year, Chicagoland Improviser of the Year, something like that. And he got on stage, took the award, and apologized. He said, "I'm sorry. I shouldn't win an award. If I'm doing my job, I don't win awards for being the best. I just make everyone else look the best." And it's like, wow, that's just incredible.
Exactly. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So next slide. Danny, we could talk improv all afternoon, I think.
Well,
so we could. So this
yes,
next this next slide has a lot of words on it. And I just put it together there so that you can get an idea of the kind of skills that we're talking about. When we talk about communication skills and emotional intelligence skills that you learn from studying dental improv or applied improvisation, all of these skills are incorporated into the learning. And we like to say we're like the gym for communication skills. You get to work out your communication skills. So Danny, I know we've got another poll lined up, and so we want to kind of segue to back to you again in the audience, even though we can't see you or hear you. I know you're there. We want to ask you a little bit about your team culture, and because, you know, a strong team culture, people feel valued and they feel like they belong in that culture. So we just want to take a poll, and I promise you, we can't tell who said what. So if you are willing to answer the question, go ahead and show them, Danny, and I'll be quiet and let you take over.
Sure thing. Well, all we want to know is on a scale of 1 to 5, with 1 being the least and 5 being the most, how valued does your team feel in the practice?
And I would add the word belong as well. We just couldn't fit that word into.
Couldn't fit it. Yep.
Right.
How belonging does your team feel on a scale of 1 to 5? Okay. We'll just give it a few more seconds. Thanks to everyone for taking the time to complete this poll, and we will go ahead and close the poll. And the results are that 25% are giving their team's perceptions a score of 3, 38% 4, and 38% 5. So no 1s or 2s, which is a very hopeful sign. And of course, this is a tough question because we're asking you to share what you believe your team's feelings are. These are really your perceptions. And of course, we hope that if you believe that your team is a 5, that is in fact reality. Part of what we will talk about and what improv helps you unearth is what's truly going on. So I think that's an important distinction that we want to make here, right, Ellen?
Yes, and also that it's not just your skills and your ability as a leader to make people feel valued and belong, but it's also the job of everyone on the team to learn some of these skills as well, because that just makes it so much easier for everyone so that they can make each other feel valued and like they belong. So I'm so glad. I'm heartened to hear that. I know on my dentist team is amazing and they have great relationships, and my dentist before that, not so much. So it was part of the reason, it was one of the main reasons I left that practice and went to a new practice. So it made all the difference, just the atmosphere of the office. So anyway, what we do is, again, we do a lot of activities with people, and since we can't do them with you, and this is going to be interesting because I can't see Danny or Jim, but we're going to have them demonstrate a couple of these activities as we go, and I'll talk you through some of them. And then at the end, if you want help with any of these with your team, we'll let you know how we can help you with that. But so the first one is about building trust, because building trust is the basic bottom line for having a strong team. And in improv, we talk about knowing thy partner as part of building trust. So we have this game called 3 Things in Common that we do with teams, and we can't do it here, but we run it as a contest. So we have, and I've done this with doctors and dental teams and all kinds of different people and corporations. So we tell them that they have 2 minutes to find 3 things in common with as many people as they possibly can. And I'm not talking about, oh, look, we all have skin, we both have glasses. I want you to find things in common with people that you normally wouldn't know about. And so then they run off and they're all laughing and asking questions as fast as they can. But the key there is they're actually really getting to know each other better. They're finding out things about each other that they normally wouldn't get to. So I'm going to demonstrate this with Danny first. And so we're not going to do a contest. I'd win.
Well, the deck is stacked. That's not fair.
Yeah, the deck's kind of stacked. You know, I should come up with a really good prize so I can take that too. But anyway, so Danny and I know each other. We've known each other through Toastmasters, and we've been working together with dental teams. And so I know quite a bit about Danny, and he knows quite a bit about me. So, and we've even practiced this. So I'm going to try and find something about him that I don't know that we have in common. And there's a really important reason why something in common matters, and I'll tell you in a minute. So Danny.
Yes, Ellen?
Last night when we practiced this, we found out we both love pesto, which was interesting. So I'm going to ask you because I don't know this about you, I loved my dog Archie. Do you love dogs, Danny? Be honest.
I honestly do, but I've never had one as a pet. I'm a bird person.
Oh, interesting.
I've had parakeets for most of my life. And what most people don't realize is that if you're going to measure affection and personality, with cat being at one end of the scale and dog being at the other, parakeets are much closer to dogs than they are to cats. They will sleep with you, they will kiss you, they will allow you to rub them, they will play with you, they will play hide and seek and peekaboo. It's pretty remarkable what a bird that an animal that just comes in at just over 1 ounce, what they're capable of.
You know, my brother had a parakeet when I was growing up, and I totally agree, and I loved his parakeet. I've never bought one but since then, but so there we go. We both love parakeets. And here's why.
Well, the only other thing I'll say, Ellen, is that ounce for ounce, they're probably higher maintenance than horses, because you spend you can get one for $20, but between the cage and the toys and the food and the vet bills, it's pretty unbelievable what you can spend on a bird.
I didn't know that, because I guess my parents paid all the bills back then, so they didn't bring that up. That's funny. So the reason that I wanted to find something in common with Danny and finding something in common with other people and with your team members and with your patients is you remember those things. You remember what you have in common, and you both can talk about it and enjoy the conversation. It's something that you both can talk about and not be bored listening to the other person talk, because you're both interested. So find things in common with people. And you know what, Jim, I think they got the point. So I'll have you demo the next one if that's okay, especially since I can't see. So 3 things in common. My favorite activity that we do is called Proud Moment. And definitely can't demonstrate this one, but we get people in pairs, and we have named them A and B, and A tells B about something in their life, and just spending a minute or two in something in their life that they're proud of. And we always make sure we say not about your kids or grandkids, something about you personally. And it can be all the way back to kindergarten, as far back as you want to go, any kind of moment in your life that you're proud of. And then B tells A their proud moment. Okay. So now they've shared their proud moments, and then they team up with another team. So there's 4 people now together, 2 pairs, and they tell each other's proud moments. So if I was paired up with Jim and he told me about winning a trophy in high school, then I would tell the group, this small group, about Jim winning that trophy in high school. And then he'd tell my proud moment about my Olympic medal. No, just kidding. He'd tell my proud moment to the group, and etc. And what happens is we then what we call debrief it. And we start talking about what was that like when someone told your story. And they discover that it actually feels really good when someone says something nice about you. And that then we talk about how often does that happen, and we realize it doesn't happen a lot. We don't go around saying nice things about other people on our team or in our families, and as often as we could. It really does feel good. And even the shyest of shy people find that saying something nice about somebody else, they don't worry about themselves so much. They're actually really focusing on their partner, which is an improv thing of focusing on your partner, and that it actually feels good to focus on someone else. So that particular activity really brings home a lot of points. And I did this with and just so you know, the data and studies are showing more and more and more in books. I've got 3 books that talk about this, that the more we get to know someone, we actually start to like them more and build trust, and start to trust them. So there's all kinds of great things that come out of this activity.
Yeah, it's a form of, it's a way that we build intimacy, actually, and it's not just about the team, but when you can do this with patients, that's the bond that really connects and translates to treatment acceptance and to appointments that are not broken. You're doing it for the right reason. You sincerely have to care about the person. And I know that you all are caring individuals, or you wouldn't have chosen this profession. And so it really is a muscle, as Ellen mentioned, but it can be developed quite easily. Just practice it, and you'll be surprised at how quickly it comes naturally to do this with everybody.
Right, it's true, and you know, and this is probably a lot more true in corporate teams, but it can be true on any team. On a lot of corporate teams, you have a lot of people all trying to look good. They're trying to look good for the clients. They're trying to look good for the boss. And if you get a whole bunch of people trying to look good, there really is no team. And speaking of teams, Jim has a great story about this. And Danny, can you go to the next slide? The radar gun?
Thank you, Ellen.
Take it away.
Yep.
Yeah.
Having a strong team, it's difficult, you know, and building that trust and having those relationships, it really makes it a lot easier. And I know from the beginning of my professional career how important they were. I remember when I got drafted in 1991 by the Seattle Mariners, they shipped me off to California to a single A team, and I didn't know anybody. And that team already played for 2.5 months before I got there. And basically the first or second game I was there, I was in the stands with my normal clothes on because I wasn't pitching that day, and the coaches always gave us jobs to do. And I had a little chart in my hand, and I was just writing down what all the pitchers and our staff were doing, what pitches they were throwing. The guy next to me, he had the best job. He had the radar gun. If you've ever been to a minor league game, you'll see a guy sitting behind home with that big gun. You know, all the kids are running around and they're, you know, going crazy because people throwing 90, 95 miles an hour. Well, that day I was looking at the radar gun, whatever the guys were throwing, and I saw that most of the fastballs were 90, 91, 92 miles an hour. Right? About the fourth inning, I just happened to glance down at that radar gun chart where he was writing down the velocities, and I saw that I didn't see one pitch that was in the 90s. It was all 87, 88, 89 miles an hour. And I realized that that guy was writing speeds down that were 3 miles an hour slower. So that guy on the mound didn't look as good in the organization's eyes. I started thinking, you know, first of all, is that going to happen to me? Is my speed going to go down because somebody's going to do that to me? And then I also thought, what am I going to do about it? I'm young, I'm green, I just got there. And I decided to think on it for a little bit, and I got lucky. I guess since that team was there, this probably been going on. And all of a sudden, one day in the clubhouse, you hear, you know, people starting to talk, you know, saying, you know I don't throw this slow. Somebody's doing something with the radar gun readings. You know, another pitcher chimes in and says, yeah, I think it's the same thing happening to me. And all of a sudden, everybody's getting in on the conversation, and everybody's taking sides, and there's clicks, and you could see that the relationships are broken, right? There's absolutely no trust on that team. And this was a team that was fighting for a playoff spot, but you could see how it affected us on the field. We started to lose, and by the end of the season, we were in last place. Now, what that guy that cheated didn't realize is that it not only affected the team, but it affected him, because in the minor leagues, when you get close to the end of the season, the big league teams are trying to make trades. They're trying to bring up guys from the minor leagues, and they're sending scouts out to look at everybody. But there's so many teams that they're going to the teams that are winning because they obviously have the better players. They're not going to the losing team. So no one on that team and that pitcher himself was getting looked at because they just weren't doing well. And it was all about that trust and that relationship building. So, you know, Danny, do you have anything that's, you know, an analogy to dentistry teams?
Well, only that it's a matter of enlightened self-interest is what I think the key takeaway is. That, you know, sometimes people feel that maybe speaking about decks being stacked unfairly, that maybe there's a team member who's being compensated more than the person maybe believes he or she should. And so there's a certain resentment that could be there, and it could be conscious or subconscious. But when you undermine somebody else, even if you think that they deserve it, ultimately that affects the team. And as Ellen mentioned, why she left one dental practice for another, this isn't a secret. People can pick up on that dynamic. And so it really is, again, a matter of enlightened self-interest, if not only because it's the moral and right thing to do, to try to support everybody on the team. Doing that will help you as well in the long, if not in the immediate term, then in the long run.
Well said. Well said, both of you. It's one of my favorite stories of Jim's, too. I would have been really upset. Anyway, so Danny, can you go to the next slide? And I wish I could see your faces so I could ask you, guess what this is about? What else contributes to creating a strong team? Listening. So in any improv scene, we have to listen very carefully, because if we miss something, we can sidetrack a whole scene. we practice listening like it's a muscle. And the more I learned about listening, the more I learned how really hard it is. So I'm going to ask you to participate in an activity, even though we can't see each other. I'm going to ask you to take, I'll time it in a minute or in a few seconds. I'm going to ask you to just sit in silence for 30 seconds. Close your eyes if you can. If you're driving, please don't. Close your eyes if you can, and just listen to the sounds that you hear in the room, outside, wherever. And then I'm going to ask Danny and Jim to do it as well, and I'll debrief it with them. So for the next 30 seconds, just listen, go. Okay, that wasn't quite 30 seconds, but I'm sure it seemed like it. All right, so Danny, I'll ask you first. What did you hear while you were listening?
Well, first I thought I did a really good job of clearing my mind. All I could hear was the mechanical in my office in background. Then I began to think, I wonder when 30 seconds will be up. And then I thought about what I'm going to be doing for dinner. And then I heard you cough. And then I heard you shuffle papers. It definitely was not as easy to clear one's mind. But I guess I did listen. I did hear. Okay. But I definitely had that voice that was distracting me a bit.
I heard the fan on my computer. I also heard a plane go overhead, and then I was doing real well until I heard there's something going on in the corner of my house. I don't know if there's the AC unit downstairs. There was a hum. So then I stopped listening and started thinking to myself, you better go down there after this and check to see where that sound's coming from.
Great examples. Thank you very much. And that's exactly why we did that, is because we're listening, we're focusing on something, and suddenly we get distracted. Our mind goes somewhere else, and we get this voice in our head saying all kinds of things like, I better go fix that air conditioner, or I'm hungry, or I need chocolate. I hear that a lot in my head. So, Danny, can you go to the next slide? So I'll let you look for a second, and then I'll explain what this means. So most people, well, go ahead and read it real quick.
You want me to read it?
So, no, I just wanted to let them, I know they're looking at the slide, so I want to explain it now. So most people talk about 125 words a minute. My voice, my Midwestern voice, is about 125 words a minute. And Jim, who's from New York, he's probably more like 140 or 160, something like that. Our brains are able to process up to 400 words a minute. So think auctioneers, or if you've ever heard Tony Robbins, he's probably pretty close up there to 400 words a minute. So if most of us talk at 125 words a minute, and some people talk even slower than that, but we can process 400, that's a big gap in there, and our minds start to wander because we start to just assume, oh, I heard the first part, I know what they're going to say. And even more so in businesses like yours, where you hear probably a lot of the same things day after day, especially receptionists and hygienists, and you hear a lot of the same things, so you just kind of pretend to listen and your mind is actually wandering. But people know when that happens. They really do know. So
I think another phenomenon related to listening, or the challenges with listening, especially when you're working with people and you're basically experiencing the same situations. To Ellen's point, we feel probably correctly most of the time that we could finish the patient's sentence, that we know what they're going to be saying. And sometimes I think we convince ourselves that it's a sign of caring, or that we really understand, or that we're knowledgeable to finish someone's sentence for them. That is something that's understandable, but something that we ought to avoid at all costs, because people feel respected when they've had a chance to recite or to express themselves. And really, the better way to do this anyway is to say, well, let me confirm that I'm duplicating what you're sharing with me, and then you go ahead and repeat what they said. what's wonderful about that is they feel even more respected because now they know that they've been heard. And secondly, if you didn't quite get it right, you're not going to be penalized. The person's going to be thankful, and you'll be thankful because then you can get clarity, which allows you to move to the next step with that much more confidence.
Well said. Well said. So can we go to the next slide? So not only do we need to listen with our ears, but we need to listen with our eyes. And I was going to show you a book cover, but I'll just tell you what it is. So Alan Alda, if you know who he is, he's the actor from MASH. And he does what we do with scientists and amazing people, from mathematicians and amazing people from around the world. He wrote a book, and it's called If I Understood You, Would I Have This Look on My Face? And that says it all, I think. Our facial expressions, you know, if you say something and your face looks a different way, reading people's facial expressions tells you so much. Their body language, when you're talking to somebody and they've got their arms folded and maybe they're kind of tucked back in their chair, that tells you a lot. Are they making eye contact with you, or are they avoiding your gaze? That can tell you a lot too. It might be cultural, but it might be something else, especially if you're talking to a team member. The paralinguistics, your tone of voice, your volume, inflection, and your pitch can all make a big difference. If you, so for instance, if I said to someone, I'm going to say the words, I am so proud of you. If I say, I'm so proud of you. I mean, that tells you a lot, the way I said that. So, and the proxemics, your personal space. Are you taking up a lot of space? Do you feel really confident, or are you kind of tucked into your chair or into the corner or not taking up a lot of space? That can tell you a lot about the person and the messages they want to give you, or maybe don't want to, but that they have for you. Are their appearance? Are they well? Is their hair brushed? You know, can you tell if they've washed their face? Are they in good? Does their appearance look good? Or have they maybe let it go? That can tell you a lot too. Are they touching you? Or do they recoil from touch? And your gestures, are they using gestures or using gestures? These are all really important nonverbal communication pieces that we tend to overlook. Next slide, please. The bottom line is that if your nonverbal communication doesn't match your words, we don't believe your words. Albert Morabian did all kinds of studies, and he, had statistics about words and nonverbals and all of those things. But he said, this is truly the bottom line. Don't worry about all the numbers, but you need to make sure that your tone of voice and your facial expressions, and pay attention to all those things if you really want to connect with somebody. Next slide.
And just another example of the importance of making sure that your vocal and verbal communications are consistent. In our telephone skills coaching, I often share one sentence, which is, I didn't say she stole the coat. And I show that if you just change the emphasis on one word, a different word, each time you say it, and I won't go through all 7, but you could say, I didn't say she stole the coat. I didn't say she stole the coat. I didn't say she stole the coat. That simply emphasizing one word in the exact same sentence can entirely change the meaning. So it really is all in how you say it. And you want your verbal and nonverbal communications to match as much as possible so people don't get confused and give you the look on the cover of Alan Alda's book.
Yes, there you go. So listening is a muscle, and it's a gift that you give people. And we already did the 30-second example of just being quiet for 30 seconds and letting people recognize that there is a voice in their head that takes over when we think we're listening. And we do another really fun activity called Word at a Time Proverb that we're actually going to demonstrate for you. Even though I can't see you guys, here's how it works. And Jim and Danny and I are going to tell a story one word at a time. And if we do it on a team, we get everyone in a circle, and then everyone in the circle, one person at a time, says a word, and you keep going around and make up a story or a proverb. We do proverbs. So like a stitch in time saves 9, those wonderful sayings. But what we're going to do is a dental proverb. And that's what we do with dental teams, is we have them create dental proverbs. We have them do a few because it takes a while to kind of get the hang of it. But it's all about really focusing and listening to what the next person, the person before you said, because people start to think, okay, well, this is where this proverb should go. And then by the time it gets to them, it's gone in a totally different direction. And if they haven't been paying attention, then, you can tell. So it's a great activity for really working out your listening muscles and having fun and laughing. So Danny, I want you to start, then Jim, then me. And when we think we've come up with a proverb, any one of us can say proverb. So there's our proverb. We'll just do a couple of them. But again, when you do it with your team, and our colleague Beth Boynton, she loves to do this with medical teams too. It's very powerful, and it really connects people because you laugh a lot too. Anyway, so Danny, what's the first word? Then Jim, then me, and keep going around until we have a proverb, and we'll call it.
Whenever
I
think
about
dentistry,
I
love
to
smile. Proverb.
Yay.
So, as you can tell, you don't come up with genius things at first, but you kind of get into the cadence of it, and they start getting better and better, and then they sometimes get even personal. It's pretty funny. So I guess that's good enough, because it takes a while. Again, just keep doing it a few times, and we even write them down and give them to the teams afterwards, and they save them. It's very fun.
And again, Ellen, just the payoff, the benefit from this exercise, you may want to just confirm that with our attendees.
Confirm the benefit?
Yeah, what muscle we're working here.
Oh, okay. But you mean the listening muscle?
Yep, it's listening, and it's also being creative, being able to improvise. It's really an improvisation exercise as well as listening, because in this case, you're not only listening to what the person is sharing, but then you've got to come up with something that makes some sort of sense, and that means improv.
And it also
Thank
shows
you, Danny.
not to plan, right? If you don't plan,
exactly,
then you're
because
you're in the conversation.
You got it. That's right. And we'll talk about that in the context of a complex adaptive systems shortly, won't we?
Yes. So sorry. Truth be told, I was trying to figure out what the next slide was while you were saying that. So I wasn't listening, right. Danny. Busted.
Good illustration.
So I wanted to mention one more activity, even though it's not on the slide, that I really love doing with people too. And I don't know if we've done this with you, Danny, but so we do something called gibberish. And so we train people how to speak gibberish, and that just means saying blah, 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 blah. Well, however you want to do gibberish. But we tell them, we write down a message for them that we want them to convey in gibberish to somebody else. So they've got to use every nonverbal communication muscle they have to try to get this person to understand what they're saying. So they say their message in gibberish, and then the other person translates what they think the other person says. And it almost never matches. But the people who say the gibberish are pretty sure that they got the message across, and the people who watch the gibberish are pretty sure that they know what they said. So it's really interesting when people do this to just kind of witness the whole nonverbal communication thing. And speaking of listening, if you can go to the next slide, Jim has another story about listening.
Yeah, so listening is definitely an underrated attribute. And I know personally a catcher that had a 10+ major league career because of listening. He wasn't the biggest guy. He didn't give the best target. He didn't hit for average or power. And when I first threw to him in spring training, I actually didn't like to throw to him. And I thought, okay, it doesn't matter because the starting catcher is going to be behind the plate. Well, the starting catcher, when the season started, got hurt early on, and I had to throw to, we'll call him Mike. And the first couple outings throwing to Mike, I did horrible. And I'm going to have to admit it was probably my fault because I already had it in my mind that I didn't like throwing to him, and it made it worse. Uh, but after a couple of outings, I realized I needed to talk to him. So I went up to him and I said, Mike, when I'm pitching, I really need you to get big, to spread out, put your glove up and open it wide and just keep it there until I'm done with my throw. And, sometimes I was waiting for a bad answer, because a lot of guys have egos, and, I was waiting for him to say, listen, I'm a catcher, I've been doing this for 30 years, don't tell me what to do. But he didn't say that. He just said, okay, sounds great. And the best thing about it is that not only did he do it once or twice, I never had to ask him to do it again. And it was just amazing. Usually people go through the motions, but he didn't. And when he would come out to the mound and I'd get into a game, and he would motivate me, like, hey, Jim, come on, you got this. And then he would start asking me questions, which never happened before. He's like, how'd you do in the bullpen? What's working? What do you want to throw? He listened, take it in consideration. And he did this with all the pitchers on the team. He would even take them out to dinner, lunch, and he would not only talk about baseball, but he would talk about their families, and he would build these relationships. And the thing is, it didn't go unnoticed because the manager knew, the general manager went up through the organization where they knew that Mike, he was needed not only for the pitching staff, but for the clubhouse culture. And he really did an unbelievable job. And he played in multiple organizations because they knew this about them. The word got around. And it was just about that ability to listen, which really helps build that trust and also the relationships. All right, Ellen,
it
we'll go to the
really
next
matters.
slide for you.
Yep. No, and if I may, the takeaway for me on that is that you may not be the best player. You may not be the most gifted team player in your practice, but you can play to other people's strengths, which plays to your strengths. Listening, caring, adding a dimension to the relationship goes so far in terms of other people's belief in you and then belief in themselves that it's a contagious thing. I have to believe that others emulated that quality, and I'm sure it helped the team's performance. Did it not, Jim?
Oh yes, they loved him. The pitchers wanted him behind the plate, and it really wasn't because of his skills. It was just because he made you feel like you were part of the team. He made you like he had your back, and you knew he's there for you, and he wanted you to succeed just as much as you did.
That's awesome. Listening, it matters. It really does. Danny, can we go to the next slide? So I don't know how many of you have heard of complex adaptive systems, and don't worry, I'm not going to go into a long lecture about what exactly they are. I'm just going to tell you briefly because I think they really matter. A complex adaptive system is not like a machine system or a robot, that kind of a system where there's parts that work together exactly the same way, and if one part breaks, you can replace it and it still works exactly the same way. You have complete control over how things work. And so far, we have complete control over robots too. So next slide, please. What a complex adaptive system is like a flock of birds. You know how you see a bunch of birds in a field and suddenly they all take off and suddenly somebody's in front and they're all in a pattern of some sort. And I'm pretty sure they don't have walkie-talkies and cell phones, and I don't think they all discussed how it was going to happen. They just all work together. They behave in certain ways. They know, okay, I'm not going to bump into anybody. I'm going to keep a little bit of a distance from everybody, and I'm going to follow. And whatever their rules are, they have certain rules that they follow, and it all just works. They behave in certain ways. And same with schools of fish. They do the same thing. I think it's fascinating watching schools of fish. Another complex adaptive system, the New York City food system. Our colleague Beth Boynton, that we work with sometimes, in her book that she wrote that I'll tell you about in a minute, she talked about how New York City, there's no food czar there who says, we need 7,000 hot dogs for Fifth Avenue on Tuesday, or, we need X amount of vegetables for next weekend. It's a series of all kinds of small systems that somehow all work together in such a way that New York City gets fed. Your healthcare teams, your dental teams are complex adaptive systems. Any teams with human beings are complex adaptive systems. Our behaviors, how we behave and communicate with each other, affects how we operate. And it's not like we are not machines, and we cannot treat each other like you should be able to do your job the exact same way every time. Things happen, as we all know. So that's the basics of a complex adaptive system. And next slide, there's Beth, and she wrote a book called Complexity Leadership, and she talks about complex adaptive systems, and that you can't control every aspect of a complex adaptive system. What you need to do is train people how to behave better so that the systems can work. Next slide. So on a good day, on a team, it's really easy to behave well with each other, right? The sun is shining, the patients are all wonderful, and everybody's in a good mood, and life is great, right? So the team works well together. Next slide. But then there's days where somebody's had a bad fight with their spouse or partner or whoever, whatever happened, different things happen. You had a really rude patient or any number of different things where the system isn't quite working as well as we want. So, or it's not easy to interact and behave well with everybody. Jim has an amazing day. Jim has a great example of a really bad day, and I cringe every time just thinking that he had to deal with things like this. And Danny's got a video to show you. And
I have.
Okay.
Here she goes. Oh, we're not having the sound. Just a moment.
If the sound doesn't go, Jim can talk it through.
No sound.
That's right. I can see it.
Jim can.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's Jim there. Walking off the mound. Why don't you tell us the good news here, Jim? What happened?
Yes, well, that's a short video, so you probably didn't catch it all. So if you would have saw the scoreboard, it was 0-0 on the 9th inning. So basically, for 9 innings, one team and one team for 8 innings, gave up no runs, pitched a great game, and then I come in on the road, and the very first hitter, I give up a home run. And then you see me walking off, the crowd is going absolutely crazy, and that's bad enough. But the thing about that game is what happens in the future. How do I deal with that failure? Because I could take that with me in the future. I could go to just in the clubhouse and for the next week, just mope around and take away that positive culture that we formed. Or not only that, I could take it to future games where it's in my head. I can't let that happen again, and it's going to bother me. The thing is, I learned a lesson in my big league career that really helped me through situations like this. And I want to give you the tools that I learned. And I can remember exactly where I was when I learned them. In 2000, I was playing for the Tampa Bay Devil Rays, and they traded me to the Oakland Athletics to be in their bullpen. They thought I was the final piece to go to the playoffs, and I was having a really great year. But despite that, late in the season, I woke up one day. We were in Seattle. We were going to play the Seattle Mariners, and there was like 10 games left, and we were going for the final spot in the playoffs. And I just woke up, and I just thought, your fastball's slowing down, your screwball's not breaking. The Mariners are a great hitting team. You're going to give up runs. You're going to lose the game. You're going to be blamed because you didn't go to the playoffs. And I had all these emotions spinning in my head, and I couldn't get rid of them. And there really was no reason for them at the time. But I kept them with me throughout the game. And the 7th inning came, and my manager, Art Howe, called up and said, get Jim going, have him warm up. And I'm out there, and I'm firing balls. But the thing is, I'm not really doing it with any conviction because my brain is still moving a mile a minute thinking about stuff. And then to make matters worse, about 6 feet from me, there's a chain link fence, and all of a sudden, a whole bunch of Mariner fans come over, and they're yelling at me, Messier, you suck. Edgar's going to rip you. My sister throws harder than you. And at that time in my career, it usually wouldn't bother me, but I was so emotionally low that it was getting to me, and I wanted to get out of there. And I got my chance because the first 2 hitters got hits. So now my manager goes out to the mound. He calls me into the game. I get down. I start throwing my warm-up pitches. And I think, oh, my God, I'm facing Ricky Henderson, Alex Rodriguez, and Edgar Martinez. Now, if you don't know baseball, those are 3 Hall of Famers or future Hall of Famers, depending on some of the steroid allegations. We'll see about that. But now I'm thinking, okay, how am I going to do this? And it just keeps getting worse. And Ricky Henderson steps in the box, and I throw him 3 or 4 bad pitches. But sometimes in baseball, you get lucky. He grounds out the third, he's out, no run score, and I should be ecstatic, but I'm not, because I know I got really lucky right there. I didn't pitch well. He just got himself out. So the next hitter comes up to the plate, Mike Cameron, and I'm thinking, all right, Mike's a good hitter, but he's not as good as A-Rod and Edgar. You've got to get him out. Don't walk him. You better not walk him and load the bases. So what do you think happened? I walked him. And now I have 50,000 fans going crazy because the bases are loaded and they're cheering, A-Rod, A-Rod, A-Rod. And that voice now is at a maximum. I don't know what I'm doing. I feel like I'm barely breathing. And I get that on that mound, and I'm just about ready to throw A-Rod a pitch, and something happens. Deep inside of me, this voice rises up and just is yelling at me. What are you doing? You're being a baby. Take the ball you've thrown your whole life, throw it to the catcher's glove. It doesn't matter if Babe Ruth came back from the dead. Let's go. And I get back on that mound, and now that voice is gone. And all I have in my head is, what pitch do you want to throw? And attack that glove. And I do. I do that for both hitters. And I strike out Alex Rodriguez, go on to strike out Edgar Martinez, and the crowd of 50,000 people is totally silent. We go on to win that game, and then we clinch the playoffs on the last day of the season. So if I couldn't control my emotions for 5 minutes, I could have blown that whole 162-game season for my team. But even more importantly, that was the last season that I was healthy, and I was physically declining and had a bunch of surgeries. But I was able to cope because I learned the ABCs of confidence. Every day after that game, I realized I have to know what's going on with my emotions. So assess. Every day I assessed what's going on in my head. I woke up and said, how are you feeling? What's going on? If I was positive, usually I didn't need to do anything. It was going to be a good day. But if I was negative, like I was that day in Seattle, I know that at a certain point before I face hitters, I'm going to have to change my mindset. And when I did face my hitters, my adversity, the next step was breathe. Just take a deep cleansing breath every pitch. That's because when we get nervous or anxious, we kind of lock up mentally and physically. We shallow breathe. We don't get enough oxygen, and it hurts our performance. And then after that breath, I would see clear my mind. I would know, okay, what's going on in there? Am I saying to myself, I'm horrible. The ump stinks. It's cold, wet, snowy. A-Rod's up. He's hitting 300. If I have any of those thoughts in my head, I know I got to shut it off and go back to basics and just think, what pitch do I want to throw? And throw it at the glove. And that is it. And when I did that, I was way more consistent, despite the fact that I wasn't quite as good as I was 2000 and before. And these can be used for anything. I still use them today. So if you're finding that you're having a problem and you're at work and it's really hard to shake, think about the ABCs. A, assess your emotions, knowing that it's there, knowing that you're having a problem. B, take a deep breath. And C, clear your mind and only focus at the task at hand, and you will definitely be more consistent. Danny, anything you have to add to that?
Just how simple but powerful that is. I've embraced those ABCs thanks to you as well, Jim. And I had a situation with yesterday with somebody who was calling, and they were trying to sell me something, and I actually was interested in the product, in the service, but I really was reminded about what I coach on is that if you're going to make an appointment or make a sale, the first thing you need to do is make a friend. But I realized that this was sort of my issue, that I needed to clear my mind and listen to what this person had to say, even though I didn't particularly care for his delivery. And so I applied the assess, breathe, and clear, and I still probably won't wind up working with this person, but at least I was able to make an objective as opposed to a subjective and emotional decision. So it was all to the good, and I thank you for that.
Yeah, thank you. You're welcome.
I use the ABCs too, and I always think about that game, that seeing Jim fail in front of all those people, and how do you not carry that with you? How do you not just go home and say, I quit? But and so
Takes
in
practice,
work
Ellen.
and in our
Takes
life,
a lot of practice.
Yeah.
Takes practice.
Well,
yeah.
and in our lives, we run into things that are difficult and makes it hard on our teams we're having a really bad day or a patient. I've heard lots of stories from doctors and dentists about, how the amazingly rude things patients can say and how that can really just throw you. And so having the ABCs on hand so that you can deal with it later, tell your wife about it, or, to your buddies over drinks. But in the moment, if you can do the ABCs, it's great. So, Danny, can we go to the enemy defender slide?
Yep.
Great. So again, complex adaptive systems, how we behave with each other, how we interact really does matter. And I often say that when we do these things, it's actually practicing getting comfortable with being uncomfortable or building resilience. So some of the activities that we do, these we really can't demonstrate, and you'll see why real soon. One is called Enemy Defender, and it's quite fun to watch. You need somewhat of an open room, because otherwise people will trip over things, and you don't want that to happen. So what we say to everybody is, all right, silently, without saying or identifying them out loud, I want you in your mind to pick one other person in the room who's your enemy. Pick somebody else in the room who's your defender. And again, don't let them know who they are. And when I count to 3, I want you to put your defender between yourself and your enemy. So walk around the room and put yourself so that your defender is between you and your enemy. Go. And so then you see just this chaos of people trying to keep their enemy away and their defender between. And of course, you really can't make it happen all the time. But what you start to see these patterns, and people are actually making it work, even though it's chaos. And then I tell them to switch. Their enemy's now their defender, and their defender's now their enemy. And so then there's brand new chaos, but then people kind of find a balance again. It really, really brings home how a complex adaptive system can work. And it's hilarious. Everybody's laughing a lot.
Yeah, they start out serious, and then everybody ends up laughing uncontrollably because it's hilarious. It's chaotic hilarity.
Okay, chaotic hilarity. Got it. I love it. So again, I just want to say to everybody, we really appreciate you listening to us talk these through, because when usually we're doing these things and you're experiencing them with us, and everybody's laughing and having a great time. So we really appreciate you sticking with us and hearing us through. So the next activity I want to tell you about quickly is called Sound Ball. And we really can't, these next 2 activities, you can't explain them well enough. You have to experience them. But the bottom line is with Sound Ball, we pass sounds and gestures. When people start, then the debrief on it is that people started to think things like, oh boy, that was a really stupid sound I just did, or oh wow, the sound that Danny just did was really cool, I wish I would have thought of that. Then we start to ask them, well, so is it true that that sound you made is stupid because you just said bloop? Is that stupid, or is that just arbitrary? And we come to the conclusion that especially when we're uncomfortable or triggered or amygdala hijack, however you want to put it, that our voice in our head gets really negative, and it's not telling us the truth. All it's trying to do is trying to protect us. So that's something that you can assess, the ABCs as well. And then clap, snap, stomp. We purposely cause them to fail doing silly things like clapping, snapping, and stomping. And it's really fun to do. And you start to see personalities come through in this game for sure. And they start to recognize lots of interesting things about themselves and each other. But basically, it's to get them to recognize what happens when you do fail. Now, failures are really, and mistakes, that's a really hot topic. And people love to say, it's okay to fail. Well, in your business, it's not, right? But here's the thing, everybody is human. And so mistakes will happen. Now, if you have a sloppy employee, that's a whole different story, but everybody is going to make mistakes at some point. So it's all about what you do when you make a mistake. What does the team do when a mistake happens? Is there a lot of blame and finger pointing? Do people beat themselves up? Or do you talk about the mistake and learn from it, take the data from the mistake, and then move on? So just like Jim in that baseball game, he took the the failure, the mistakes that he made, and he learned from it, and he moved on to the next game. So really powerful lessons from these things that you really can't get from a book or from a lecture, even though we're lecturing you. Very powerful to do.
Well, and I'll give a little spoiler alert on that score, because we can't really, you can't really experience the power and the magic of these exercises. We got Ellen to agree to offer you something. So for those of you who do are staying with us until the end, we're going to make sure that it's worth your while. So stay tuned. And I've advanced to psychological safety, Ellen.
Thank you. All these big words. I'm sure most of you have probably heard the words psychological safety, and you probably even heard yes and. But yes and is it's the foundation of improv, and it's what makes improv work. And what it means is that you say yes to whatever your scene partner says. You accept them. You postpone your judgments. In fact, we tell people to leave their judgments outside the door. They'll be waiting for them when they come back. But postpone your judgment and accept what they have to say and build on it. That's what makes a scene work. I often tell a story about my first Second City teacher. She was in her very first show at Second City, and she's out on stage. She's very nervous, but she starts a scene, and things are going okay. But all of a sudden, she said the word motel. Now, she didn't mean to say motel. She meant to say motel. So when she said that, she froze. And she thought to herself, oh my God, I've just ruined the show. My scene mates are going to think I'm an idiot. I am an idiot. Meanwhile, her scene mates saw her freeze. They heard her say motel because they're all focused on each other, paying attention, listening, and watching body language and everything else. They heard her say motel. They knew the audience heard her say motel. So they turned it into a scene about her being terrified for her first day of Yiddish barber school. So I love that story, and it really illustrates yes and all the other tenets of improv, but they yes anded what she said. She said motel, okay, we'll accept that and we'll build on it. And it turned out at the end of the night, people were coming up to her saying she was a rock star. How did you come up with that? That was amazing. Yeah, it was genius, right? So, yeah. So yes and is a very powerful, and it helps create psychological safety. And I won't go into the studies and the Google study and Amy Edmonton and the surgical teams that they found. They thought that the best surgical teams would be the ones that made the least mistakes, but that wasn't the case. They found that the surgical teams that were most successful and the best at what they did actually made mistakes, but they dealt with them and talked about them and were not blaming and adapted to what was happening. So psychological safety is a really important piece. And so we work with them with yes and helps you create it. So Danny, next slide. I think we're going to skip demonstrating this because it takes a while, but we have these activities that are very powerful and that help people understand what yes and is and really experience it. Basically, they learn that especially if somebody is presenting an idea and they don't usually participate in a meeting or something like that, if you say no to their idea, they're going to just shut down and they're not going to come back to you with ideas. So saying yes and to people, accepting what they say and building on it. You don't have to, if someone says, well, I think that we should have monthly vacations in Tahiti. Okay, you don't have to pay for monthly vacations to Tahiti, but you can say, well, wow, what if we did do that? You know, what would happen? And people can build on it. And then you can say, well, okay, so we're not going to do that, but what could we take from this? Clearly, we all need a break. What can we do? So yes-anding is a really powerful thing.
Yeah, a variation of that is also, or an additional benefit is that if you realize that the suggestion is maybe not feasible, yes-anding the person and then exploring what the implications of the suggestion are can actually lead the person themselves to then decide that perhaps this isn't the best course of action. And so they haven't shut themselves down so much as they've come to the realization that perhaps there's a better way to approach this. And you did it because you definitely handled the communication. You were never in the position of having to shut anybody down. It works really well. So yes and is probably one of the most powerful phrases that you can work into your vocabulary.
Definitely. And you don't even have to use the words yes and, just the mindset of yes and makes all the difference. The second activity is something that is amazing for conflict transformation, or when you have two people who are really disagreeing about something. And basically what it is we do it simple, like if the conflict is one person likes creamy peanut butter, one person likes chunky, or something along those lines, something very simple. And one person talks about how they like what they like about creamy peanut butter, etc. And then the other person, who's just listening and not responding till they're done talking, says, "Thank you for sharing that about creamy peanut butter." Because, and then they go on to say, "I can tell that this value is important to you." Whatever they recognize, like, I can tell that you really love friendships because you talked about eating creamy peanut butter with your friends, that friendship is a very important value to you. So you take that skill and you bring it out to a real conflict where somebody's saying something to you that you don't agree with. It's controversial to you, but just listen all the way through and see if you can find something that they value and you can identify that. It really helps to get the conversation calmed down and people feeling heard, which is really important.
Ellen, it's funny. I'm thinking I've been peeking in on the confirmation hearings for Justice Ketanji Brown, and no matter how hostile the question she's asked, she says, "Thank you, Senator," and she basically paraphrases what you're saying here, and then she tries to find something in what they say that they can find common ground with. It's quite remarkable to watch, and it's very disarming.
It is. Yes, Danny, I'm glad you brought that up. It's true. She is doing that. It's amazing. And it's such a powerful tool to teach a team, for sure, especially if you get, I remember I was teaching some dermatologists and we were talking about this, and they were saying how using this with patients could be super powerful. And I so agree. So Jim has a great quick story about how yes and really is important.
Yeah, yes and baseball don't seem to be like they go together, but in actuality, people don't realize we have team meetings just like any other business. Every time we have a new team come in, we get the pitching coach, all the pitchers and the catchers. We go into a conference room, and the coach has, scouting reports, video. He's got spray charts, everything, any tool he needs for analytics. And it depends on what kind of pitching coach you have. If I have a yes and pitching coach, it'll be a great meeting. If I have a no or a yes but, a lot of times I don't come out with a plan. I learned this early on. We were playing a game against the Seattle Mariners, and our pitching coach brought up A-Rod, and he said, "All right, well, everything here shows you want to throw him high fastballs and curveballs." And I started thinking, all right, I don't throw high fastballs because they're not my strength, and I don't even throw a curve. So what am I going to do? And I thought about raising my hand, but the guy next to me beat me to it. And he also has a little more time. I was a rookie. And he raised his hand. He said, I throw A-Rod sliders, and it seems to really work. And the coach just kind of looked at him and said, we got all these tools here, and it says high fastballs and curveballs. So let's just stick to the plan. So for the rest of the meeting, no one raised their hand. No one talked. It was just a coach blabbering on, showing us charts. And by the time it was over, I realized, I didn't have a plan. I didn't know what I was doing. And of course, I went out that series and I got hit hard and we didn't do very well. And I just thought, it wasn't even just about not having a plan, but not having that plan also killed my confidence because I didn't know what I was doing. But it wasn't always like that. If I had some coaches that yes and a meeting where if that same guy raised his hand and said, I throw A-Rod sliders, the coach would say, "Okay, great, anything else?" And everybody would have a voice and they would say their piece, show whatever their experiences were, they would put it out there. And by the time we were done, everybody had a plan because we're all different pitchers. We're not throwing the same. So we need to know what we can take and use and put together. And when you do that, you have a plan, you're going to have confidence. But even more importantly is that yes and also helps build that trust and a relationship, because now you feel like you're valued because your voice is being heard and your ideas are put out there. And that's a really also a very important point for yes and that goes a long way to building those strong teams. Anything, Danny?
No, I think you made the point really well. Just that people have to feel that they're being heard, and really it showed a little bit of limited, I think, scope on the part of the pitching coach to not recognize that people presented to the to the team with different skills, and unfortunately probably never had any idea of the impact that his shutting down people like that probably had on the team's performance.
Yeah.
It is so important. And it does make people feel valued and feel like they belong when you listen and yes and what they have to say. So it's a great thing to learn and to teach your teams for sure. We go to the expressing ourselves slide, Danny. Are we there?
Yeah.
We're there.
Oh, sorry, I can't see. So obviously, what I'm saying here is that what we are thinking often shows, and so we need to be aware of how we are expressing ourselves, and because people are watching all the time. You're in the spot. If you're the dentist, you're the boss, you're the leader. People are looking to you to see what kind of day they're going to have. Is he in a bad mood? Is she in a bad mood? Oh man, it's going to be a bad day. So, how we express ourselves can make or break other people's days too. And people are watching you so carefully. Can you go to the next slide, Danny, to the gorilla slide? So in 1959, Dr. George Schneir went to Central Africa to study mountain gorillas. And at the time, the perception was that these were really vicious, dangerous beasts. But after living among them for 2 years, he discovered that the gorillas were in fact actually gentle and compassionate and extremely intelligent creatures with complex social structures. So when he returned to present his findings, a biologist in the audience said, "Dr. Schneir, we've been studying these creatures for centuries and we didn't know any of this. How did you get such detailed information?" And he said, "It's simple. I didn't carry a gun." So while it was common practice for researchers, they stash a weapon in their backpacks when they went to study these animals, in just in case something went wrong to protect themselves, of course. But Schneir never did. He said he believed you could hide a gun, but you could never hide your attitude when you carried a gun. So the moral of that story is that whatever you're thinking, like if you don't like a particular employee or if you're trying to hide an attitude towards someone, you can't. People know what you're thinking. So you need to deal with what your intentions are and what you're thinking and what you're expressing to people. And expressing ourselves on purpose, we call it. So we have a number of activities that we do to help people express ourselves on purpose. So I like to say that we already have different ways of expressing ourselves, but we don't really recognize it. For instance, if you have an accountant, you talk to your accountant in a certain way, probably a little more business-like, then much different than you would talk to a baby, your friend's 6-month-old baby, right? So you're not going to say to your accountant, "Oh, would you like some coffee while you do my books? Can I sharpen your pencil?" So it's a matter of just beginning to recognize the different ways we express ourselves and practice expressing ourselves in different ways. So one of the things that we do is an activity called Hi, How Are You? And I'm going to have Jim and Danny do it really quick just because it's great. It's great fun to watch. But we do this in the groups and they do a number of different ways, and it's always one of their favorites. So Danny, I want you to say the words Hi, How Are You? And then Jim is going to say, "Fine, thank you." Danny doesn't like that because he doesn't like to have people say "fine, thank you." But for this exercise, that's what we're going to have you do.
That's another story.
So,
yes, and I will
story.
be happy to do it.
Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you guys an emotion that I want you to express when you say your words. I want you to show it and let us hear it in your voice. Okay. So I want you to say, "Hi, how are you?" And "Thank you very much. I'm fine, thank you." You are angry.
Hi, how are you?
Fine, thank you.
I love that. All right, now I want you to say it as if you are embarrassed.
Hi, how are you?
Fine, thanks.
I wish I could see you guys. I can't. So you can imagine that when people are trying these things on, at first they're embarrassed and they're like, oh, this is, but then people, like they want to keep going and going and going because they start having fun expressing themselves. I do another one called I Like Pancakes in different settings. We're just in a circle. Everyone goes around the room, around the circle, and says, I like pancakes. And I give each person a different emotion to say, I like pancakes. So lots of really fun ways to get people to recognize that they can express themselves in different ways and expand the way you do. And finally, we do something called party, where we split the room and we tell one half of the room that they are quiet and shy and inhibited, and we talk about the nonverbal attributes that, like, not making eye contact, things like that. The other half of the room is, we call it high power dynamic. So you puff your chest and you talk loud and you take up a lot of space and you're feeling it today. And we tell them, you all know each other. You're going to have a party. I want you to mingle. Go. And what you see is the high power dynamic people go walking over to the quieter people and trying to engage them, and the quieter people are kind of cowering from them. And then we tell them to switch, and they do. They switch, and all of a sudden these quiet, shy people are puffing their chest and talking loud and taking up space. And the most interesting result from this is that people who are normally high power dynamic people, extroverts, we like to call them a lot, they find that they are irritated by the introverted or quieter, shyer people. They want them to come out of their shell. Come on, be like me. And the quieter introverts, the shyer people, they are irritated with the extroverts for being so loud. Just leave me alone. Let me be who I am. So that's a really interesting dynamic that they discover about each other. And there's a lot of discussion about that always. So,
well, and it's always relative to yourself. That reminds me of the George Carlin joke. He would say, do you ever notice how anyone who drives slower than you is an idiot? and anyone who drives faster than you is a maniac.
I remember that. George Carlin is awesome. Well, thank you all so much for participating or for listening tonight. We really, truly appreciate it. I wish I could have seen your faces. I wish I could have seen Jim and Danny's face. But
likewise, Ellen.
Danny, you did a great job with all of this, so we appreciate it.
Well, it's my pleasure, and we do have the offer slide up right now. So, I think we can make up the somewhat limited experience with what I think is a very generous offer and opportunity. Why don't you tell our attendees a little bit about it?
Sure. So any of the activities that we told you about tonight, and they're all listed there on the slide, if you'd like to try any of them with your team, or if you have a manager that you'd like to have do this with your team, send me an email. It's right there, Ellen Schnur at improvtalk.com, or you can just go to improvtalk.com and go to the comment section and send me a note that way. Just let me know what the activity is, and I will send you a write-up for that activity. And if you'd like some coaching on how to run it, I'm happy to include my contact information, and I can talk you through it.
And for those of you who are just listening in, the email is ELLEN.SCHNUR, Ellen.Schnur at improvtalk.com.
Thanks, Danny.
Sure thing. Well, thank you. I really appreciate it. I think it was a very stimulating discussion. It's always fun for me to get a little more involved than I typically am in these events. And now I just want to remind you that in a few days, you'll receive an email with instructions on how to apply for your CE credit. Again, please note that the code for this course is IMP 032220. You will need this code to request your CE, so please be sure to write it down. And now I'd like to invite you to mark your calendars for Thursday, April 28th at 6 p.m. Central Time, when my special guest will be Rick Williford, CPA, whose presentation is entitled Dental Cash Flow for Dummies. Attendees will learn why most CPA financial statements are useless for running a dental practice. They will understand the difference between cash flow and profit, and how to turn QuickBooks into a practice management dynamo, freeing you from CPA dependency. It all happens on Thursday, April 28th at 6 p.m. Central. Until then, this is Danny Bobrow, thanking you for your ongoing commitment to practice perfection, and once again, thanking you, Ellen Schnur and Jim Mecir.
Thanks, Dan. Thanks, everybody, for coming.
Good night, everybody.
Thank you, Danny. Good night.